welcome to you all. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It is my very great pleasure to welcome you to County Hall for this BCS hosted event on apprenticeships. My name is Kate Russell. I'm a technology reporter and journalist of about 20 years pedigree. I predate Facebook, which is a fact that my nephews and nieces find quite unbelievable. But it's always a great pleasure to be here at a BCS event. And I have to say, it is really heartwarming to see so many of you come out tonight. And really, I think, a testament to the importance of apprenticeships in the digital sector, and also to the commitment of the BCS membership to making sure that we have enough good, strong, young talent coming through to make our industry even better and brighter than it ever has been. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping announcements to make. There is no fire drill planned tonight, so if an alarm goes off, the organisers of the event would like us just to stay where we are. Which is pretty much what most people do when they hear an alarm at an event, but I'm assured that somebody will come and tell us how to evacuate the building safely in the event that happens. We have a hashtag, of course we do. Use it to death tonight, please. It would be great if we can get this event trending. If you hear any comments that you agree with, or you've got something you want to add to the mix yourself, pictures from all angles, please do tweet away, and let's get other people talking about this that couldn't be here tonight. So we are going tonight to dig deep into the world of apprenticeships and learn more about how these schemes can benefit both businesses and young people, and of course, most importantly, the economy. Tonight's event brings together apprenticeships community from both government and industry employers, training organisations, colleges, distinguished guests and BCS partners. And thank you all for joining us, and those of you who are joining us through the live stream. Hello, welcome to you. Congratulations for still being warm and in your slippers while you're watching us. But hopefully you will also participate in the event through the use of the hashtag. And of course, once we get to our panel in a short while, we will be taking questions from our audience, and I'll be checking Twitter as well. So if you want to throw any questions into the mix from the live stream, you are very welcome to do so. So let's make no bones about it, though. The fact that we need to really work together to plug the digital skills gap that we have in this country, and in fact really across the world, to ensure that we have diversity and strong talent coming up through the pipeline into the technology industry. Last year's report by the UK Commission for Employment and Skills found that 1 in 4 graduate jobs went unfilled because of the widening skills crisis across the UK, while 14% of employers report skills gap within their own organisations, and there's every indication that may well be higher, I'm told by Perry, this year, up to about 20%. So we also continue to struggle to get a diverse mix of people working in the tech sector. And again, Perry tells me the latest figures are actually really encouraging in terms of education, potentially up to 37% of people entering higher education in technology and computing, or ICT and computing, are actually now female, which is brilliant. So hopefully that will be coming through into the workforce in the next few years. So as the cost of higher education grows, we all know it is, and the numbers of young people looking for tech careers continues to fall short of demand, apprenticeships, I think, and I think a lot of you here will agree with me, form a vital part of the mix to develop digital talent and secure growth for this exciting and vibrant industry. They're a way to invest in our young people and to upskill those who are already working in our companies, so they meet the ever-changing demands of working within the digital sector. Tonight you'll hear from a variety of guests, all committed to apprenticeships. They will share their expertise and thoughts on the future of apprenticeships and how we all play a role in their success. But this isn't just about them. As I said, it's your chance to have your say, make your comments and also ask your questions. Please, no 10-minute soliloquies when you get the microphone. I will be coming down on you if you go on for too long, but we want everyone who has the opportunity to, or everyone who wants to speak, to have the opportunity to do so tonight. And I know how engaged and thoughtful BCS audiences always are, so I'm expecting great things from you all tonight. At the end of the evening, there will, of course, be the chance to network. We'll have a few canapés, and some drinks, and your chance to network and mingle with some of the best experts in the field of apprenticeship. So whether you're looking for advice or offering advice, we'll have the chance to chat and mingle in the networking at the end of the evening. And all of our speakers today, apart from the first one, will be coming back on for the panel. So if you think of a question, save it, and when they come back on for the panel later on, then you can pose your question to them then. So now it is my very great pleasure to introduce our first speaker tonight. Savit Kaur Singh is a UK tech apprenticeship. Aged 22, she's already presented at the European Parliament in Brussels, don't you know? And she is going to share her experiences with us now. Please welcome Savit.
So, good evening everybody. Tonight I'd like to share with you my apprenticeship story. So how I became an apprentice. I finished college with my A-levels and I decided to work in the family business. I knew university wasn't for me because I didn't know what I wanted to study. Whilst job searching, I came across the IT apprenticeship, which I was instantly drawn to because I knew there was a growing demand for IT professionals. I'd studied IT at A-levels and GCSE, and obviously there was a draw of a proper salary. Looking back retrospectively at my apprenticeship scheme, I feel extremely grateful and privileged for the amount of learning and development opportunities that were opened up to me. I was put on a flexible development and learning programme, tailoring my learning to my interests. I learned a broad range of skills and secured several prestigious qualifications. As well as this, the IT apprenticeship exposed me to other potential career options within AXA and roles I'd never knew existed. And it allowed me to work towards one of my choice. I think the apprenticeship scheme is an excellent platform for my first step on my career path, resulting in me gaining a permanent role at AXA a year prior to the scheme ending as a business analyst, which I'm currently thoroughly enjoying. It's because of organisations like you here today that I'm here sharing my success story and able to promote the apprenticeship scheme. And I've been able to inspire other young people at school and college events I've been involved with. As an apprentice, your journey does not stop when the apprenticeship scheme finishes. It's only the very beginning of an IT profession. I'm 22 years old and I've successfully completed my BCS Business Analysis Diploma, qualifying me for my role. Through QA, I've gained an extensive amount of knowledge and skills from the courses offered through my apprenticeship scheme. My first year, I learned about the IT department and how all the other roles are linked. This broad understanding supported me to make my decision to become a business analyst. But it's not just about the qualifications. It's about the practical knowledge that you learn and the real-life work experience that you get from your colleagues. I was also asked the question, as a woman, do I believe that the IT profession can do more to attract women to IT roles? And I believe that they can. And the way in which we can do this is start at the very beginning of the educational system at schools and colleges. I think this early promotion will get rid of the stereotype that the most successful people within IT are men aged in their 50s. And when you talk to people about an IT workforce, they mainly say, oh, it's just men in suits working at a computer. And this doesn't really reflect the current IT workforce. Equality and diversity are at its highest it's ever been in years, and there's been a noticeable change in the focus of customer needs and a more collaborative working environment. This has led to interpersonal skills becoming more important rather than purely technical. These creative soft skills need to be clearly publicised so we can change the perception of IT. IT professions can often lend itself to flexible hours and career paths, so more companies should take advantage of this and publicise it, and that might appeal to more women. Social media, I think, is an excellent platform for young people. I think on there we should share real-life examples with young people today. In order to do this effectively, more female role models must emerge to inspire young people to aspire to be more like them. And finally, there's certainly not an equal amount of men and women in IT. However, that's not to say there's inspirational, powerful, successful women within IT, because I know there most certainly are within AXA. and I'm sure there are within your organisations too. I would just like to thank you all for your investment in young women like me, and thank you for listening.
Due for an eye test soon. Okay, well, an inspiring story and some really insightful words there about diversity and her experience, and we'll talk more about that later on. Next up, I would like you to welcome to the stage Anthony Impey from Optimity. He's Vice Chair of the Government's Apprenticeship Stakeholders Board, and he's going to speak to us about the reality of delivering an apprenticeship scheme. Please welcome Anthony.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Anthony Impey. I am a apprenticeship superfan. I am involved in various initiatives around apprenticeships, including sitting on the government's apprenticeship stakeholder board. I work with Mike Cherry, who you'll hear from shortly, at the Federation of Small Business, shaping apprenticeship strategy for small businesses, and also involved in various other groups to help really promote apprenticeships. And I thought the words that we just heard about an apprentice's journey really resonated with me, and I think really tells the huge value that an apprenticeship can bring an organisation. And I think my expertise in apprenticeships first and foremost comes from running my own organisation, Optimity. And I need to talk to you a bit about Optimity. My investors get very upset if I come to a speaking event and don't talk about the company that I run. So I'm founder and CEO of Optimity. We are a Shoreditch-based business. We supply businesses with broadband using a new wireless technology that removes the need for fibre optics. And we've been doing that since 2012. And because we are supplying a service that lots and lots of businesses need, we have no shortage of people that want to buy our services, no shortage of companies that want to buy our service. And our number one challenge within our organisation is recruiting the right talent that we need in order to grow. And we've really struggled with that. We tried recruiting from people within the industry, but found they didn't have the right skills because we were doing something completely new. We tried recruiting graduates, and that kind of worked okay, but we always struggled to find people with precisely the right skills, and most importantly, people with the right attitude and ambition. And in fact, we turned to apprenticeships a bit out of desperation. We'd exhausted every other avenue, and so we turned to apprenticeships as a way to find the talent we needed. And we found that it was a fantastic source of raw talent that we could then mould and develop in the form that we needed as an organisation. And to that end, I just wanted to kind of give you an example of one of my colleagues that came through this journey, a guy called Shah. He won't mind me sharing his story with you. He joined us 4 years ago now. When he started, he had absolutely no technical knowledge at all. He knew how to use his phone, and that was it. He's now one of our key network engineers. And I remember interviewing Shah when he came to join us. And although he lacked qualifications, any qualifications at all, he had real ambition and drive and real determination to prove something. And it was only later that I kind of learned a bit about his story. So he left school with a couple of GCSEs, and his big challenge was that from the age of 15, he had to pay, he was responsible for paying the family mortgage. His mum was very ill, his dad became his mum's full-time carer. And it meant that Shah was going to school and then leaving school and doing a couple of jobs in the evening, working in a takeaway shop until very early in the morning, and then kind of rocking up to school. And it just meant that he just didn't get, he didn't get the opportunity to study. And so by all accounts, he just didn't have the qualifications in order to start a career in IT. And actually for us, the qualifications weren't important. We wanted to find somebody with the right attitude and ambition to come and join our organisation. And I think that's one of the huge things that, one of the huge benefits that employers can get from this is that they can recruit somebody with just that raw energy, that raw talent, and give them the skills they need in order to be very successful in the organisation that they're working for. I think it's important to tell Shah's story, for me to share Shah's story with you, because I think it kind of gives some pointers to why apprenticeships are so important for companies. And what we've found in employing apprentices, and to give you an idea, about 20% of our team has been recruited through apprenticeships. So we are really committed to apprenticeships as a strategy. There's some kind of key things that we've learned from this. The first is that you need young people to join your organisation who have got the right ambition and attitude, and nothing else matters. The qualifications don't matter. You just need to find people with the right attitude and ambition. And that is critical for the whole process to succeed. You've got to have good people at the beginning of the process. You've got to offer those young people a great journey through the organisation. And I think that word journey kept coming up in the last presentation. It is a journey that you're going on as an employer with that young person. And so every part of the organisation has got to be contributing to that young person's development. We do something called an executive briefing. It sounds very grand, but it's essentially the managers within the business, they have a weekly meeting with the apprentices and talk to them about different aspects of the business. Just an example of how an organisation can really get behind the training and development of a young person. I think the other thing that employers can do is really get involved in shaping the curriculum that their apprentices are studying. And the government has introduced a policy called Trailblazers, and it allows employers to engage and essentially help write the qualifications that an apprentice can study. And I think as a policy, it's quite revolutionary. It's essentially the government saying to employers, write 2 pages of the qualification you need in your organisation, and then we'll turn that into a qualification. But I think the last point, and the most important point about businesses and their engagement with apprenticeships, is that it's got to be good business. We employed Shah because we had a requirement in our organisation. We had a requirement for talent. And through that requirement, we were able to give Shah this experience and give him this start to his what will be a hugely successful career. But the key driver, I think, is that apprenticeships have to make good business sense for those organisations that are engaged. It is not about corporate social responsibility. It is about doing good business. And I think that is the thing about apprenticeships. It's an opportunity for employers to train and develop the people that they need in their organisation to do the jobs that they need doing. And with that, I will leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, you'll have a chance to ask your questions of Anthony a little bit later on, as I mentioned. Next up, we have Mike Cherry from the Federation of Small Businesses, and he's going to be talking about what small businesses should start thinking about regarding apprenticeships. So please welcome Mike to the stage.
Thank you very much, Kate, and very good evening, everyone. I am genuinely delighted to be here this evening to talk about small businesses, apprenticeships, and to look at what small businesses truly do need if they are to be able to engage fully in enabling our young people to have the training and the skills that we so desperately need for our future. Training, skills, education, ensuring our schools have a far better understanding of the diverse range of small businesses in their local communities, and encouraging more engagement between small businesses, local schools and colleges remains an absolute passion of mine, Today, I believe, though, there is an added impetus on all of us to deliver on this. But there is also an equal opportunity to make the changes that we need if we can just simply grasp it. FSB is the largest organisation representing small and medium-sized businesses in the UK, as well as the self-employed. We are very pleased that around a quarter of our members currently have at least one apprentice. But if we are to really get to grips with what we need to do, then we have to see many more able to engage. Core to this is for government, employers, and indeed all of us to actually start again to value what an apprenticeship is. Now, at its heart, it is our ability to recognise that good vocational training is at least unequal to academic, and that with higher degree apprenticeships, these can offer a more effective way in which individuals of all ages can actually enhance their careers when it suits them. Alongside this, small businesses in particular need a system that helps them to identify those individuals who have the right abilities to be trained, help them to choose an outside provider they have the confidence and understanding in. And this will add to and complement the on-the-job training that they are prepared to devote their time and money into giving that individual. Smaller businesses do understand that apprenticeships do make good business sense. And we know this because FSB conducted our most in-depth survey to date on apprenticeships only last summer, resulting in over 2,000 members responding. And whilst we celebrate this, we continue to have concerns for the future. If I take a look back myself, apprenticeships were something that we all understood. Certainly in traditional trade-related sectors, we had a relatively simple system, but most importantly, everybody understood both the value of the offer and what it meant for those taking that vocational route. We also had the expectation as well as the support of friends and family. In short, we had good vocational training, understood by all, with consistency of offer. If we take a look at other countries, we see long-term policy making and delivery, which is consistent over time and linked to the education system. So where are we today, and what do apprenticeships in small businesses look like? Well, we know that most apprenticeships in small businesses are 16 to 19-year-olds at either level 2 or 3. We know that for over 2/3 of apprenticeships, they lead to full-time employment. And we also know that for nearly 80%, there are new jobs within a business, and that businesses do indeed see this as a clear business advantage. We also know, though, that there are still too many challenges facing a small business when they seek to take on an apprentice. There is even now a lack of information, both in terms of content and in the navigability of resources. This applies whether the business is taking on its first apprentice or seeking to grow their current provision. Quality, though, has to be the byword. Yet for far too many, there is still concern over the quality of apprenticeships. Quantity should never, ever be the target. So good vocational training with good apprenticeships that deliver for the needs of the businesses and for our people must be absolutely at the forefront of policy. And it is pleasing to see that at last we are seeing a shift towards this. For 1/3 of our members, though, it is the day-to-day management of that apprentice which concerns them. Small businesses, by their very nature, are lacking in resource, in time, and in money. So taking on an apprentice has to be seen in context with the additional value it brings to the bottom line for them and for their businesses. FSB believes that we have almost a once-in-a-generation opportunity today to build on the good progress that is already there now in support of small businesses. Indeed, small businesses should be a critical ally to government in boosting apprenticeship provision. But how? Firstly, small businesses need to understand the apprenticeship levy that is coming along. Most of our members, of course, and most small businesses will not pay the apprenticeship levy, which comes in April. Yet we have evidence of considerable confusion among small firms over their eligibility. Neglecting to communicate effectively with the majority of the employer population, our small businesses, is a cause for concern. Small businesses are struggling to grasp what the apprenticeship levy means for them, with much of the messaging and focus on big levy-paying employers. If we do not get that communication right, then more small businesses will simply not engage, not because they don't necessarily want to, but because they struggle to get the help they need to understand it, and we need to be making sure that the system and processes actually are working for them. So simplicity has to be the watchword. Secondly, more does need to be done to communicate the changes that will affect them. With the changes to funding arrangements for those that qualify, there are, though, significant opportunities. We know that smaller firms which take on 16 to 18-year-old apprentices will not be required to make any financial contribution towards the cost of that training. We know that businesses who take on younger apprentices will also benefit from a cash incentive of £1,000 per apprentice. Businesses who take on younger apprentices as well. Government is taking to allow large businesses paying the levy to share their digital apprenticeship vouchers with small businesses across their supply chain. This offer is a real opportunity to boost skills development. We also know that many more small businesses would take on an apprentice if we can only get this right. However, some small businesses face an entirely different scenario. Regardless of whether a small business will benefit from apprenticeship concessions or not, government does need to ramp up its messaging and outreach to small businesses. In particular, small firms need to be aware of any investment they may be expected to make. Emphasis should be placed on the gains to be made from making this important commitment, and failure to do so could lead to a reduction in apprentices being offered, with small firms deciding that apprenticeships no longer offer the value for money that they once did. We also need to see a discernible voice of small firms in all areas of apprenticeship policy. There are still not enough SMEs taking part in the government's Trailblazers programme, as Anthony has highlighted. Only 2% of FSB members have been part of one, despite 12% of our members saying that they are interested in taking part. So the new apprenticeship system must be designed with the needs and requirements of small businesses in mind. Getting it right in the support that we offer for small businesses, then it will be right for everybody. So think small first. Small businesses will also need to understand through a simple and easy system how to access any third-party provision and what it is that third parties do indeed offer to those small businesses. Is it genuinely delivering what the business needs, or is it just to fulfill a quota? So to sum up, small businesses really are the driving force behind apprenticeship growth, if we can get it right. What's more, our evidence shows that they are creating jobs for younger people and providing credible pathways into the world of work. But we also know that they need access to the right information, to adequate support and confidence in the quality and relevance of training being provided. We believe the government is heading in the right direction, but there needs to be a far greater focus on preparing small businesses for the changes on the horizon if we are to ensure that recent good work will not be unpicked. For once, we are, I believe, presented with a great opportunity. Small businesses want to support it, but if we don't get this right, if we don't grasp the opportunity before us, then we will not be empowering our young people to truly see vocational as an effective route on which to build their career, nor enable them to achieve their aspirations, both for their future and indeed for ours. Thank you.
Powerful messages there indeed. Our final speaker before we get on to the panel session, he was the Secretary of State for Business, Innovation and Skills from 2010 to 2015, and also the Member of Parliament for Twickenham during that period. Please welcome to the stage the Right Honourable Sir Vince Cable.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I think this is a great event, and congratulations to BCS for getting you all here. I think I can probably be useful, not obviously in the specifics, but giving you a bit of the context. I mean, there aren't too many people in the audience of my age, I guess, but I was recently looking at the speeches of Harold Wilson 50 years ago, launching the white-hot heat of the technological revolution. And he could actually be making the speech today. The letters IT didn't mean anything in the 60s, and hashtags certainly weren't there. But throughout Wilson's speeches, there were a couple of themes, right? One of them was the chronic skill shortage in Britain. This was 50 years ago. It was there then, it's there now. It's going to get worse because digitization is speeding up technological change, and because, for better or worse, I don't want to get into the controversies, we're getting Brexit, which will mean less immigration, and that in turn will remove the safety valve that we currently have. So the skill shortage problem is going to get worse unless we have a mechanism for addressing it. The other big theme with Harold Wilson's speeches half a century ago was that the British education system was highly dysfunctional and was not geared to helping with skill provision. It goes back to the Second World War. We could have gone down the German route and had a three-tier system of grammar, secondary, modern, and technology schools. It didn't happen. We got two tiers. Vocational education was devalued. And a whole series of decisions ever since have made it worse. Polytechnics were absorbed into universities. The apprenticeship system around City and Guilds, Higher National, all the rest of it has been allowed to atrophy. So those fundamental problems have been there and have remained. That was the context that I took up my job 6.5 years ago. And it was a very difficult situation, austerity, massive deficits, you know the problems. And we made a series of decisions then which define the way that apprenticeships are now being approached today. And if you'll bear with me, I'll just a few minutes to explain the logic of where I think we now are. The first was that I was faced, anybody in my job would have been faced with the need to make cuts. We could have just taken away the money from further education colleges and employers and just say, well, you know, get on with it. But instead we took the view that we should prioritize. So we slashed mercilessly spending that we thought was unproductive, train to gain, and instead we prioritized apprenticeships and put money and political capital into expanding apprenticeships. So that's partly why we're here where we are. The other thing we did that was exceedingly painful, but right, was the decisions around universities and tuition fees. It was absolutely politically toxic, and my colleagues, me and others, suffered the political consequences of it. But it was the right thing to do, and as actually universities are very healthily funded today. But we wanted to turn the disaster into an opportunity. And so we wanted to get a message was that young people have a choice. They can earn and pay by going to university, or they can learn and earn by doing an apprenticeship. And instead of a one-way ticket, basically, that everybody who has any aspiration goes to university, we wanted to bolster vocational education and apprenticeships as a valid status alternative for young people. I think it's taking time for that message to get through, but that was the rationale that we wanted to adopt at that time and helps to sustain a lot of the drive behind apprenticeships. Now, what lessons have we learned since? First of all, this emphasis of apprenticeships produced a lot of quantity. We got a massive boost in apprenticeships after 2010. But there were negatives, and my government and the successor government have had to gradually deal with these. And I'll just run through them because they apply to the way apprenticeship schemes today. First of all, we discovered there was a lot of complete rubbish in the apprenticeship system. There were a lot of employers who were offering 4-month courses in an estate agent's or a retailer, and you get a certificate at the end of it saying you've got an apprenticeship. Well, that was, you know, Mickey Mouse, a lot of it, not all of it. We effectively disqualified any qualification with less than 1 year of vocational education. Some people said we should have been tougher and done 2 years, but we eliminated anything under a year. Secondly, we discovered there was not much progression. A lot of people were being stuck at level 1, 2. What we really needed in the economy were 3, 4, 5 levels, right? And gradually, this is now beginning to happen. I'm looking at the recent growth rates. Skill level 3 and above is the area of real expansion, which is exactly where it ought to be. Lord Sainsbury did a very good study recently on technician level shortages, and that's where the need is. And the last thing I did in office was to produce a green paper defining the role of further education colleges. And it was partly remedial, but it was also higher level apprenticeships, not just apprenticeships, higher level, 3 and above. And that is where the real expansion is now taking place, with university equivalent qualifications. And that is where the emphasis is now taking place and where it should be. Thirdly, there was a real problem of quality, not just short and cheap, but just, you know, qualifications that weren't transferable from one employer to another, or from one sector to another within a broad family. And in order to deal with that, we brought in the so-called Pathfinder schemes, and this has been extended. We set up the Coding Academy. I'd be interested in discovering here whether that's actually beginning to have any kind of impact on the sector. But to try and deal with this issue of quality as opposed to quantity. And of course, this isn't just an issue for the vocational apprenticeships. It's an issue for university courses. One of the things I was horrified to discover when I was in government was that the IT sector had the biggest shortages of any industry, but it was also the area of the highest level of graduate unemployment, people on computer science courses, because people were emerging with computer science degrees that had no relevance to the IT sector. They'd not done even basic coding, for example. So there's an awful lot of work that had to happen, is having to happen, to get the quality issues properly sorted. Then a fourth issue, which links partly to a wonderful introduction from our young apprentice, was the attitude amongst young people. And I don't blame young people, because what's happening is that in schools, almost every teacher is a graduate. That's, you know, it's a graduate profession. So they know the UCAS system. They know if a kid has done even moderately well in GCSE, you get them to fill in the UCAS forms. It's all very simple. Very few of them have a clue about how you go about getting your kids into an apprenticeship scheme. They don't understand the system, and it's difficult. So there's a major barrier at that point. And I have to say, my government made a terrible error, actually, not pointing fingers at individuals, but in scrapping the career and advice service for schools before we'd got an alternative. And this certainly set back that issue about how you motivate and focus the attention of young people. And then lastly, we discovered, and Mike Cherry has, I think, been over this territory, the problem with companies. The simple point is that although the government and ministers, and me included, go around boasting about how many apprenticeships we've funded, most training is done by the private sector. It's not done by government. Government puts in some money, but most of the resource comes from the private sector. And the vast majority of companies don't do any training at all. So the question is, how do you create a system of incentives to change that? And that brings us exactly up to date and where we are today. And just in my final comments, just make a few comments about what is now happening in terms of policy. And I'll adopt the format of Match of the Day 2, for those of you who follow football. Too good, too bad. I'll start with the too bad. The government has set a target for apprenticeships. Terrible idea, absolutely terrible idea, because it confuses quantity and quality. And actually, we've learnt enough in the last few years to know that it's the right kind of apprenticeship that matters, not just the numbers. So that's one of the bads. The other bad thing, and I see this because I'm in a project working at the moment with the FE sector, was a requirement that was introduced by the Department of Education a couple of years ago, that young people, in order to progress at 16, have to get their 5 Cs at GCSE before they can go on and do further study. And what I now encounter in FE colleges is that lots of kids who are actually quite bright and highly motivated, but are not very academic, and that cannot answer questions about the 17th century novel or whatever, are stuck. You know, they just want to get on and do an apprenticeship course at quite a good level, but they cannot pass these tests. And the colleges are sort of festering with this frustration, and employers are being denied access to good people because of this bar that exists. So if any of you have got any influence, I don't have any influence with this government, try and persuade them. Try and persuade them to reopen that policy. It's doing serious harm. But there are some good things that are happening, really good things. I think the establishment of the Institute of Apprenticeships, it's taking to a higher level this emphasis on quality and recognised qualification. I think that's really good. And although Mike has expressed his reservations about it, I think the principle of the apprenticeship levy is a good one. I mean, they could foul it up, but the principle is absolutely right, that companies that don't train and are free riders and just pick up other people's trained labour should pay, and that those who do genuine training should be supported. I mean, the principle's great. The problem is, you'll find out in April whether this is working. There are several potential problems, one of which is that the Treasury is always greedy, and they may use this scheme to claw back existing government funding. We don't know. We also suspect that some companies will game the system in order to get access to the new funding without actually doing training properly. And the other problem, of course, is that some very good companies will find themselves double taxed. That they're already paying for training, and then they've got to pay a levy on top of it. So it could work badly, but I'm optimistic. I think the concept is right. And with your help, because it's going to need the help of business, this system could be made to work, and it could mean that at very long last, we've got a proper, durable system for vocational training. I just want to finish with one point, if I might. I'm sorry, I've gone a little long. Which is that we're thinking of all these problems, I think, in a kind of narrow box of specific vocational training schemes. But what really matters, I think, is not just that, it's transferable skills. And the brutal truth is we've got millions and millions of people, particularly my generation, who are digitally illiterate. I mean, I've been forced to become digitally illiterate since I lost my job in the government. And before that, I had an army of handmaidens who used to do all my tweets and so on, but now I have to do it myself. But there are millions and millions of people over 50 who haven't got a clue how to use a computer, who are not able to function in e-government and all that stuff, and whose jobs are going to be lost in the next few years. They've got no way of getting back into the labour force. So what is badly needed, I think, is not just apprenticeship training. It's adult education with a very strong IT component. And that side of it, I'm afraid, is being badly overlooked in the current enthusiasm for apprenticeship, desirable though it is. So thank you very much for your attention.
Brilliant. Well, an excellent contribution to this part of the event. Now it is your chance to ask your questions, and I've got a few myself. I'm sure you have too. So please welcome back to the stage to participate in the panel Mike Cherry, John Pritchard, Anthony Impey, and a newcomer to the stage, Paula Parker from Aviva, who are a large employer already delivering apprenticeships and huge advocates for equality. So, Anthony, can I just get you? I'm going to sit on the end there, because then, yeah, people can look at the side of my head and see the side of yours. Brilliant. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me. I want to start actually with a question to you, Vince. You know, coming off the back of one of the points you made in your presentation, about this, you know, it being a status alternative, because, you know, in my experience as well, speaking to young people, it is kind of if you don't get through to university, then, you know, then you go for an apprenticeship. It's a second-class kind of option. How can we do more to educate, you know, is it the young people we need to educate? Is it the educators? What can we do to get through this message through?
I think it's quite a subtle problem. I don't think it's just vocational versus academic. What I discovered in my ministerial job is I used to be taken around all these wonderful car factories and so on and asked them about their apprenticeship schemes, Nissan and BMW and all these people, and Siemens in the engineering industry. And they'd had a fantastic story to tell. You know, they'd have thousands of people applying for every apprenticeship, and it's actually much more difficult to get into a good apprenticeship scheme than to get into Oxford and Cambridge, actually. But the problem is, once you get below that level, the companies have no visibility. And I went to Manchester a few years ago, and the Siemens apprenticeship scheme was hopelessly oversubscribed. But at the same time, Manchester SMEs had clubbed together to try to get 600 Manchester school kids to fill digital apprenticeships, and they just couldn't recruit them. So the problem is not just universities versus training, it's making it clear that apprenticeship through a reputable employer, which may be not a household name, is worth doing. And I think in order to do that, you've got to make it much easier for school kids to get into apprenticeship. And the way to do it, I think, is to have the equivalent of a UCAS application. And we started working on this in government. I don't know where it's got to. But so that, you know, a young person who is genuinely interested in this approach can fill in a form, you know, work it through on the computer screen, and they will be offered some interesting jobs locally. That's what will, I think, change it.
Like a formal way to enter into the process. Right. Paula, let's hear from you. Now, obviously, Aviva, huge advocates of the apprenticeship scheme. One of the statistics I mentioned in my introduction is that 1 in 4 graduate positions went unfilled in 2015. Don't know what the figures are yet for 2016, but have you found, tell us a bit about what you do at Aviva, and have you found as well that, you know, it is helping to plug that skills gap in terms of filling those graduate positions?
Yes, absolutely. And just for the benefit of the audience, please don't confuse Aviva Solutions with Aviva Insurance. I'm sure they're a very credible apprentice employer as well, but we work in a different industry. It was actually part of that skills gap that first led me to introduce apprenticeships. We've run a very successful graduate programme for the last 10 years. And in 2015, we actually found that we were not able to fill all of our graduate positions. There was a lack of applicants, and of those applicants that we saw, there were some that appeared not to have the passion and enthusiasm for the software development work that we were looking to fill. And so I took it upon myself, having met Nick Bowles at a particular apprentice event, where I had believed that there was too much red tape, so it's too difficult to introduce an apprentice programme. And actually, through that conversation with Nick, I came across Apprentice Ambassadors, and I'm now the chair of the Greater Cambridge Apprentice Ambassadors organisation. And so I took it upon myself, really, to fill those the graduate vacancies with apprentices. and we've had a real mix. And I think the ladder of opportunity and one of the key things about social mobility, we have been able to find a really solid mix of apprentices that are supporting the technical industry through our business administration apprenticeships, but also the new Trailblazer software developer apprenticeships as well. We have a couple of young people that had started university and dropped out after a year. They didn't feel that it suited them. So now for them to be nearing the end of their level 4 software development apprenticeship and have the opportunity to go on and achieve a degree is something that they're just so passionate about, and they thought they'd been completely robbed of that opportunity. But it's not only for the young. We have a 32-year-old ex-carpet fitter who is doing a change of direction into software development. So within the whole Cambridgeshire area and the east of England, we have developed a lot of close relationships with schools and colleges. But going back to your first question about who do we target to help people understand the benefit of apprenticeships, the parents as well, and I'm sure many people here are parents, and they too need to recognise that there absolutely is an alternative and that going to university is not the only thing.
And an alternative that doesn't necessarily rely on the bank of mum and dad for the next 4 years as well. Of course, another face to the stage you haven't recognised, I was chatting to him earlier, which is why I didn't think it was a new face. John Pritchard is the BCS Head of Apprenticeships. Now, John, perhaps you can maybe answer Vince's question of earlier, which is about the Coding Academy. Are we beginning, what's your experience of the tide turning in favour of apprenticeships, and are we beginning to see the results of initiatives like the Coding Academy have an impact in the workforce, or are we a way off that yet?
Well, I think time will tell, but as things stand at the moment, the more initiatives that are out there, the wider the audience participation is. So any of these initiatives that are taking place now, and the Coding Academy, again, supported and funded, it makes that easier for people to access. I think that the big thing about it isn't just about whether that's happening. It goes back to the part of, are they transferable skills outside of that? Because whatever people do, there's no point stopping at that point. We know it's a continuous learning. But if those aren't transferable coming out of that coding college or wherever they've started that, there's nowhere for them to go and develop those skills. So time is seeing and recognising some of that things now. But ultimately, yeah, we are seeing a difference. But it's just putting it more out in the economy for everybody else to see the different initiatives that are taking place.
And I suppose as we begin to see the results, like SAT, the results actually out in the community and get great role models who've gone through the experience, then that is going to be a momentum driver in its own right.
I think so, and I think there's many people turned up. This demonstrates how much it's getting out there. But I think the more and more we see, I know people talk about the diversity and we need to get more females in. It's great over the last couple of years. If you look at the awards, even the nominations in the awards now, you're seeing more females into those awards, in the top winning awards for the first time. And all of those are bringing the public awareness up. And I think, I've been to many events where people stand up and talk, and you get that impact. But it goes back to the point, I think parents need to buy into that as well. There is a stigma around this. There is a barrier. And I think the more people that can talk at that level, it increases that awareness that those parents then buy into it and everybody else buys into it.
And in fact, all the way through the chain of education, careers advice, as Vince mentioned, it's non-existent. I was speaking to somebody recently who said that they met a young person who was very sort of across ICT, was really interested, was learning to code, and their careers officer sent them for their work experience to work in a retail store. Which is beyond ridiculous, isn't it, Anthony? I mean, how can we make sure that the education process at every stage along the way is actually making people aware of the great opportunities in digital?
I mean, controversially, I'm not really convinced of the value of careers advice.
Right.
Controversial,
right.
I know. Sorry, Vince. But
was his mic not faded up for that? He just said He's not convinced about the value of careers advice.
And the reason I say that is because I don't think careers advice has ever been very good. And I think, you know, you meet a lot of people who are very successful in their careers and that they had similar experiences to the one you described, or they were told that they'd be an excellent librarian. And librarian is, by the way, an excellent profession. But I'm never convinced that actually careers advice has ever been particularly good. And so now that we don't have it, we are pretending that it was really, really good in the past when actually it wasn't so good. So I think there is an aspect of it not being particularly relevant, especially now when young people in particular have access to so much information and have access to social media and are very, very well informed buyers. And so I would just challenge whether careers advice in schools is ever going to be the best place for a young person to establish the right direction for their career.
Yeah, I remember when I was given advice, I wanted to be a vet, and I ended up working in a dog kennels for 2 weeks, and they actually got me mincing green tripe for a week. That was what I did, mincing and bagging green tripe to be sold as dog food. So that was my very short-lived career as a vet. Okay, now this is your opportunity to ask questions as well. So I'm going to sort of like start opening up to the floor. If I glance around when people are speaking, if you want to ask a question, just catch my attention. If I nod at you, then you don't need to sit there like that for like the next 20 minutes. I'll come to you as soon as we have an opportunity. I've got a couple of audience questions that came in through the BCS, though, beforehand. Let's start with Jeff Chapman from Ecom. You here? You here? Give me a woo if you're here. Yes, there you go, woo. That was very, 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 very sensible woo, that was. How confident are the panel that our industry can be exemplar by delivering IT apprenticeships without using a single scrap of paper? Interesting question. Mike, you're laughing in a way that says you want to answer this.
Well, I am. I seem to remember being told that we would have a paperless office probably 2 decades ago. And if anything, we've still got more and more paper coming through whatever we do. I think it is a generational thing, though. In my own business, we have our son in there. He's late 20s. And he, like many young people, thinks in a completely different way that I do. I still go to paper, as you saw me reading out what I'd written for tonight. But also, even now, I'm beginning to train myself that actually the iPhone is a pretty good way of keeping notes because I can never find the piece of paper. He thinks of it in a different way. And when it's younger people even than him who are still at school, still at college, we need to be thinking how they think. And I think over time we will eventually get there, but certainly not yet.
And the problem with paper is, the benefit of paper is it doesn't need batteries, right? So this is. I mean, I'm a big fan of paper scripts because the last thing you want to do is your iPhone or your smartphone to run out of batteries halfway through the script. Now, next question is from Gary Weinstein from Aconia Grad Start. Give me a woo if you're here. Not here. But either that or I've so badly pronounced his name that he didn't recognise it. Okay, I'm going to put this to you actually, Vince, I think. How important is it to develop employability, i.e. business soft skills of apprentices to make them better, more rounded employees for their employers? And this touches on the point that you were making. That it's not just about getting a certain skill set, is it?
Yes, one of my things I do these days is I sit on the board of a company which, a German car company, it's a tier 1 supplier in the German car industry, and I'm amazed by the level of commitment. This is employ 1,000 people in Bavaria, and they have 25, 30 apprenticeships. Now, I can't think of many British companies with 1,000 employees that would have 25, 30 apprentices. But what was remarkable about them is not the quantity, is you go into the apprenticeship school, and this is widgets for Mercedes and Audi, and what they're teaching them is creativity. Creativity is it's German kreativ, you know. That's what they have to do. They have to think creatively about the work they do, not just learn the skill, but they're the kind of people who will lead the company in future in terms of new ideas about product design and process management. And So as you rightly say, it isn't just learning a mechanical process, it's that creative thinking. And I just don't think we're anything like that, certainly on the manufacturing side in the UK.
And as you know, Sat mentioned as well, in her experiences, she gained as much value from the working with her colleagues and actually learning how to interact with her colleagues in that business environment, as well as the harder technical skills she needed. Okay, we have a question down here. If we could get a microphone to the gentleman in the middle. Oh, I'm going to make you run. And then we'll come over to you, Sarah, next. Yes, down here. If you could introduce yourself, let us know who you are, and then tap it. See, give it a tap.
Do I just shout?
No. You're gonna. If we want the people at home to hear, you're going to have to shout very loud.
It is working. Hello.
Yeah,
I'm Steve Bonnet from Toucan Computing. We're a small business that provides IT services to schools. And about 15% of our workforce are apprentices in the 16 to 18 age range. We've interviewed quite a lot over the years, over the last 2 or 3 years, and we found it quite hard to find 16 to 18-year-olds with the right soft skills. We're not really looking for technical people. We want to train them to be that. So that's my comment. My question is, what can we do? Because we haven't yet interviewed one female candidate. Every single person who's come through the colleges or whatever as a possible candidate has been male. So what do any of the panel think we can do or can be done? We're not even getting them to interview. We haven't actually had one yet.
You are not alone. This is a story I hear again and again and again, and I do a lot of campaigning for gender equality within the tech industry. Paula, let's come to you. Is this because you are great advocates of diversity? Are you finding the same? Is it difficult to get women? And if not, can you perhaps share your knowledge and experience? And
it is difficult. When it comes to our business admin apprenticeships, then the split is quite different. Having said that, we have 2 young men currently and a third to start very soon on the business admin side of things. And there will be the opportunity, there will be that ladder of opportunity for them to perhaps get involved in some more technical roles if that's what they choose to do. When it comes to the software developer apprenticeships, it's interesting because we are on a mission to increase the levels of girls coming into that, but we have not had one single applicant. And I think the way that we can all support that is through our own social networks, you know, other parents that you're talking to about apprenticeships. We do a lot of work with the WISE organisation, Women in Science and Engineering, and the People Like Me programme that they run. There is a leaky pipeline into engineering roles, technical roles. People start out at the lower levels of education being really excited by it, and then as they progress further and further up, the pipeline is just leaking. So by the time you get to people that are going on to university to do software degrees, for example, then already we have lost a lot of that pipeline. So it is really important, and I think every one of us has the moral obligation and also, of course, the obligation for our businesses that diversity in business makes sense and adds a new dynamic, a different dynamic, and more creativity. It is a big, big challenge. I would urge all of you to make closer links with schools, with colleges, with your local apprentice ambassador networks, because we can, each and every one of us, make a difference and make engineering, make science, make technology much more exciting and attractive to girls. But it is going to take some time. We do not have any applicants that are female. It's a real challenge.
I can actually add something to the mix here in terms of my experience, because I do a lot of research and a lot of speaking on this subject. And, you know, we've heard actually, Perry told me earlier that the statistics would seem to say that we perhaps are doing a good job of plugging that leaky pipeline, but it's going to take a few years before that education is going to come into the workplace. But there's an organisation called Next Tech Girls who specialise in recruiting apprenticeships for girls in technology, and they're finding a lot of they're doing great work at the moment. I can put you in touch with them if you want to at me on Twitter, anybody. And the other thing is, one of the things that I found again and again in the research that I've done is that the language that we use in job descriptions can tend to be very male-centric in terms of through the recruitment process. And there was a study that happened about 4 years ago. They did 4,000 job applications, and they found that changing the language for an engineering position from male-centric language to more female-centric language, taking away the shopping list of requirements, making, stressing more the sort of, the customer-facing elements of the job, and actually rather than being, we're an aggressive, go-getting, blah, 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 actually using slightly more feminine-centric language, they had a massive improvement in the number of people who were applying to go for that job. And Made.com found the same. They found that if they took the shopping list of requirements away, when a man sees a shopping list of, you must have this skill, this skill, this skill, this skill, if he can do 5 out of 10, he'll say, I can do those, I'll apply. A woman would look at that same list and say, I can't do 5 of those, so I shan't apply. So those two things, looking at the language that you use in your recruitment communications and removing that shopping list of hard skill requirements, it's been proven, can have a big impact on the number of women coming through application process. Right, I'm going to throw it back over there now to the gentleman that we gazumped earlier on. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Mike Burt. I work for BAE Systems, so I'm one of these big employers who takes on loads of people. And so I'd just like to give a bit of a shout out for big employers, because there is, I think, a benefit from having apprentices and an apprentice scheme where you form a cohort of people, a community, and actually, I think rather than thinking of it as big business versus little business, we should look more at how can we work better together, because the big companies have to have to provide a lot of infrastructure to support the admin and bureaucracy, which is maybe a barrier to the small businesses taking it on, because they can't afford to take on an army of administrators. So maybe if the small companies worked in partnership with the bigger companies, they could leverage off the stuff we're having to pay for anyway for our own community. That's my comment. So there's a suggestion.
And your offer? Can we give people your email address?
I believe, I'm not personally involved in it, but I do believe that there are some relationships like that between us, between BAE Systems and some of its supply chain
It's
companies.
worth having those conversations with larger organisations within your sphere of business, you're saying.
My question, if I can get to it and not take up too much time, is about this leaky pipeline, because it's my biggest worry. And I'd like to ask the panel if they think that that's because schools struggle to recruit talented science and mathematics teachers because industry offers better career opportunities for them. So the inspirational teachers who inspire and light up the young minds before they even get to apprenticeships have done first-class honours in English at Oxford and Cambridge and all that. And those kids get somebody for doing their mathematics who's not that kind of inspirational figure. Now that's maybe a bit of a stereotype, but do you think that that's a symptom or a cause of what we're seeing?
Well, this is, I've seen firsthand over the last couple of years with the switch in the curriculum back to computer science from, learning to use a word processor. I've actually seen schools where, they just go, oh, who knows how to use a computer? All right, you're now a computer science teacher. So, it's seriously that bad in some places. And they are not given any opportunity to advance their own knowledge. And it's not like history, where your curriculum pretty much is the same year on year. The curriculum changes almost every 6 months, right? So, what do the panel think? Anthony, you're nodding along. Do you have any thoughts on how we can make sure that the education system is supporting this drive?
Well, I think I can't remember who said it, but the statistic around the number of IT related graduates and their lack of relevance of skills is kind of a reflection of exactly the questioner's comment, in that actually the education system as it's currently structured means that so many young people actually just automatically end up going to university and pursuing their career by studying and spending £40,000 at a university, when actually they'd be much more suited to pursuing a vocational education path. And I think what's very interesting is speaking to more and more young people now. I think they're standing back, they're seeing their peers go through university, come out the other end, not being able to get a job. And actually I think there is a tide of young people that are now saying, actually, we want to start our career by going into an apprenticeship, pursuing the new level 6 apprenticeships, maybe even a level 4 apprenticeship, but something that gives them a pathway into a job and they've got that visibility. But I can't help but feel that the education system is just not producing the kind of talent that business needs, and particularly the IT sector needs today.
Vince, do you think, everyone always goes up in arms when you talk about the private sector playing a bigger part in the education process. Do you think we will ever change our way of thinking about that? Do you think we will ever say, okay, maybe Microsoft, Google, Facebook, maybe they should send people into the classroom to teach?
Standards, quote, have been relaxed in order to enable professional mathematicians and scientists to go into schools. That now happens. It's much easier than it was when there was effectively a closed shop. And cynically, unfortunately, the best way of recruiting graduate teachers is to have large-scale unemployment, because in periods of recession, unfortunately, this happened. You know, the period of 2008 to 13, large unemployment. We got a migration of very, very good quality maths, science people into schools. It happened in the 1930s, but that's not an adequate solution. I think to some extent you do have to use market forces, and schools are able to pay a bung to get good quality specialist teachers, and I fear there's probably no alternative.
Yeah, okay. Well, we've got a few hands going up and down now, so what we'll do is we'll come... Actually, who are you closest to that's got their hand up? There we are. If you go to this gentleman first, and we'll gradually work our way that way across the room. How about that? Thank you.
Hi, Fergal Hogan, Shipping Guides. We're publishers in Reigate, just outside London. We have great difficulty finding apprentices, male or female, and it's not because we don't want to pay them. It's because they just don't seem to want to apply. We work with a local FE college, and they send people to us, and they're just not suitable, and it's a real problem. And
why are they not suitable? What, they don't have the requisite skills, or is it an attitude?
Some of them are personal skills. They really aren't self-starters. We're a small company. They need to be reasonably dynamic to work on their own with supervision, but being able to self-start. And that's just the people that were sent are not able to do that. We have one apprentice now, who's brilliant, and one vacancy. And I just feel that there needs to be a greater focus on recruiting apprentices and getting people into it. And we have spent money trying to attract people to join us, and we just can't find people locally.
John, your membership are here in the room gathered. They need your help. What advice do you have?
Well, I don't think I need to make any advice. By the time you walk out the door, there's 9 providers outside that will be biting your hand off to come and prove you that they can find the right person. And I think sometimes it comes down to finding the right partnership to do that. We go back to the parts about the schools and working with the schools or the colleges. But part of it is we talked about the job descriptions, the titles, so give it network administrator. If it's a network administrator, network engineer, change to network administrator, you'll get a bigger attraction. So there's many things you can do in terms of that. But my biggest point to it is, if you want to engage with that college or the school that you're working with, is to go and have those conversations, or work with a provider that's in your area that you know is a recognised good quality provider who has got a great track record, can find the right people, and it's down to the initial briefing, that you give that provider and explain that job, and they then will go and find that person for you, and they will shortlist it for you. And I guarantee you, when you walk outside this room, there will be 9 people pestering you by the time you've got to the bar. Because there are keen people, and it's just highlighting and finding those people.
Okay, let's move through our block now. There's a gentleman down here. We'll come to you next. And a lady. Oh, all three. The whole front row wants to have a word. Let's go with the front row first.
My name's UWADIAE, and I'm from the Maidenhead District Chamber of Commerce. So I have a technology background, and I have children who are very online and so on. An observation, and I'd like to hear the panel's comments on it, is very often when you look at, and I've been looking at some IT advertised jobs, and they very often focus on the end technologies rather than what you bring or what you're doing for the company. And I wonder if that's part of the language that needs to change. So I'd invite thoughts and comments on that.
Good point. I mean, Paula, do you find that, do you do a lot of thinking about the language that you use in communication for opportunities within your company, or does it speak for itself?
It's interesting because I've had exactly the same conversation with Wise today about the language that we use in all of our job adverts, because we are prone to simply writing a task list and not making it particularly attractive. When it comes to recruiting young people into apprenticeships, we have actually found that engaging with the schools and getting some of our young graduates and existing apprentices to go and enthuse about the roles that we have definitely helps. I think many of the teachers don't really understand the application of the subjects that kids are studying, and then the application in the workplace. So I think, again, that we can do a lot with regard to the language that we use, and helping people understand that rather than talking about the task list in a role, what we actually need for software development, for example, is problem solvers. And actually taking every opportunity that we can to realise that that's the heart of the software development, is somebody who can solve problems. And very often in schools, when I talk to kids about what are they good at, they'll say, oh, I'm good at maths. So what does your teacher advise you to do? Oh, well, they advise me to become an accountant, which is fine. I'm sure that's a fine profession. But an accountant in what industry? How else could you apply your mathematics? Did you know that mathematicians make great software developers? And it's only then that people come to realise it. So there's definitely something that we should all be doing about the language to help people understand the role that they can play.
More and more I have these conversations, it's almost we need to rebrand the IT industry. Sorry, Chartered Institute for IT. It's, we're still going to call it IT, but it kind of needs to be rebranded to make people realise that it's actually a multi-industry discipline now. It's just not an industry in its own right anymore. It crosses every sector, and you can work in any field that you want. There's going to be a role. Okay, let's continue down the front row there.
It's Becky Plant, Head of Apprentice Solutions from QA. Firstly, a quick observation on the recruitment piece. We recently ran a campaign within government for cyber apprentices, and the top performing candidates in that programme were actually females, the top 4 people, and saw an increase of 38%, purely based on the way that the adverts were phrased and worded, and then also, because of the leaky pipeline that you're already suffering, if you have a leaky pipeline in that recruitment phase, you're not assessing females to their natural strengths, you're then also going to lose them. So it's how do you keep females engaged in that recruitment process as well. I'm going to take it off a little bit of a tangent from the leaky pipeline into going back to the levy. So one of the things that I've got a question for the panel, and particularly John, is about employer-led, employer-owned, and obviously that's where the levy kind of drives employers driving and owning those policies. Do you think, John, from your point of view, Head of Apprenticeships, do you have a view that employers should be taking notice of some of those policy and funding documents now that they're in the driving seat?
Absolutely. I mean, they change weekly. We all know that those documents are out. And again, last week another document came out with the updates. And I think if employers aren't taking notice of those documents, it's their money. At the end of the day, the power has been given to the employer to dictate what they want. They, I won't say own the provider now, but literally, if that provider isn't delivering what you want, they can stop that apprenticeship. They have the power to do that. It's their money. So if people aren't aware of all those rules and people don't understand those documents, are you just throwing your money away? Are you picking the wrong provider? Have you got the wrong course or apprenticeship that person's on? Have you picked the wrong content for that course? You need to understand what that money will buy you and how you can maximise. So Vince was talking earlier about how L&D is the biggest budget that has been hit in the levy to pay this tax, if you want. So in that, how are you taking current training and maximising that into the apprenticeship? Is that possible? If it is, you recoup that money. You're not spending twice out of two pots. But if you don't understand how that structure works, you will not maximise that. What you will end up with is paying the tax and paying out of that L&D budget for further training. And it's if you select a partnership with a good provider who understands that, who can help you and guide you, then you will maximise that funding. And ultimately, you are going to have, at the end of your fingertips now, an apprenticeship system that your money goes into monthly and comes out monthly. And if you aren't happy with what you've got, you can stop that by pressing the button and stopping that payment. You can transfer the learner to another provider. But it's understanding that empowerment now as employers that has totally changed the landscape of what you're doing.
Excellent, thank you. Right, okay, I'm aware of I want to get out of this middle section. So we've got one question there, then we're coming over here. Those are the hands that I saw up at the beginning. And then this gentleman here. And then we'll come to this gentleman, and then we'll come over to this section of the audience, and we'll throw the ball back over to you at the end, don't worry.
Thank you. Yes, Paul Freeman. I'm an independent consultant working with lots of corporates. I think, John, it's picking up on your point. So working with a lot of organisations at the moment they have a business as usual learning budget, and they're using that to fund what I would call just-in-time training interventions, whether it's Prince 2 Foundation, whether that's an ITIL course, whatever it may be. And in order to therefore maximise the levy and actually use that or use their levy payment in order to now fund what was a BAU budget previously, they're now having to find a way of making sure that they can take almost those individuals who are, let's call them established within a role, within the organisation, and find a way of then, and forgive the term, but apprenticizing their almost a BAU job role. And when you're looking at that, and from my understanding, looking at the needs in order to therefore draw down off the levy, you're almost talking around about demonstrating up to 20% of an employee's working life being then given towards development. Now, from a purely economic perspective, and looking at how do you then justify that when there's still sales targets to be hit, operational productivity targets to be hit, etc., how do you therefore offset and underpin that resource without then significantly increasing the cost base? And some organisations I'm talking to are just saying, well, we can't afford to do that, so we're just going to have to give up the levy as a tax write-off, purely because of the fact that we would have to increase the resource base quite significantly. So I'm keen to just get a view of from the panel how they could answer that.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, do you want to sort of maybe tackle that? Is this something you're hearing a lot from your members? The fear of this sort of levy being such a financial drain that it kind of makes it an impossible situation.
As I said in my remarks, clearly most small businesses will not be paying the levy. But I think it comes back to a fundamental point that I tried to make, and that is that we all actually need to understand what is happening. And for small businesses, trying to understand what is not quite there yet, let alone large businesses, in how Mike was making the comment that BAE support their supply chain. This is going to take time, and I think that was one of the points I was trying to make. If you go back to the 70s and 80s, we had a system, may not have been perfect, we did have careers advice, again, it may not have been perfect, but most people, including parents and others in the community understood that there was something there. You have the same situation in Germany. Again, it is not perfect, but you've had that consistency of people being aware of what is there. You had that understanding that an apprenticeship was a good way to start somebody off after they had gone in for a vocational skill rather than an academic skill. And I think, you know, if you go back to a previous government where it was university, 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 or whatever phrase it was used, we've got away from recognising the real benefits that young people can get from genuine, good vocational training where they are not necessarily suited or adapted for educational. Sat, you made the very early point, you know, you were being pushed down the university route, which is something you really didn't want to do. And time again, I hear from young people that that is something that is only being offered to them. So I think we have a long game plan ahead of us. It has to be consistent. Small businesses will take time to understand it, and it does require for small businesses and schools to be engaging more together. It needs teachers to understand what is out there, and it's not just BAE or a bank or Siemens or one of the large car manufacturers. There is a tremendous range of skills required in all sectors, particularly in many small businesses, as the gentleman who was looking for somebody for his publishing business was saying. And we have to get back to understanding what it is that we need, how we phrase that perhaps in a better way than just saying we want an engineer. Within engineering, there is a multitude of skill sets required, including IT. Within other sectors, you have CNC machines nowadays rather than mechanical machines. You have specialists in hydraulics and all the other skills that you need across engineering, for instance. And within business more generally, you know, administrative skills comes back to being IT and digitally enabled. So everybody needs to understand what is there. It's a long-term game plan that we're on. It is not something that is there for the latest initiative that politicians may or may not just come up with. And I think the government is at last, thanks to what the coalition started with Vince, and FSB had very, very good engagement and support through that. We are on a long journey, and we have to recognise that is not going to deliver quick results necessarily.
Okay, absolutely.
Can I
Right.
just pick
Yeah.
up on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to this 20%, I think, again, go back to the understanding of what this 20% entails. Because people will sit there and go, 20% is away from the workplace. 20% of off-the-job training doesn't necessarily have to be at the workplace. And if you've got a good provider and you're engaged with someone, we're all educated, we're all in a digital sector. If we cannot do this through a blended learning approach, and we can't use the tools and services that are available to us, then there is something wrong. So it doesn't have to mean that that person is out of the workplace and losing productivity all the time. It has to be a blended approach. It has to be fit for the learner and for the company. And if you've got a good provider, that provider should do that. Now, if that provider can't provide that for you to get that blended approach and reduce that amount of time out of the workplace, I would recommend that you find someone else that can do that. But in a digital age now, we should be doing more blended approach and reduce that amount of time away from the workplace.
At the end of the day, I guess the education and the training is about an element of your business, so you can build that into doing that job within your business. Really good point. Okay, gentlemen here, and then we're moving over to this section.
Hello. Hello everyone, my name is Camilo Romero. I'm industrial engineer and recent graduate of project management in the Royal Holloway University of London. I wanted to ask you about the age range to the panel. What do you believe it is, if the right age range, it is like a burden currently to get proper apprenticeships and young people that is getting into the IT careers? And if there is a possibility of like amplifying the range of the age, given the fact that maybe there are young professionals between 22 and 27 probably that are looking for starting a good career development and that are potentially more mature than others into getting to a good professional development and then afterwards generally get a position into the company.
Yeah, and this actually goes to answers perhaps one of the statistics that I mentioned in my opening as well, which is still there are a large number of companies reporting a skills gap within their existing workforce. And Vince, you yourself mentioned that there may be older people looking for a career change who are coming out of jobs that aren't digitally skilled. Do you think that we can, can we take the concept of apprenticeships and widen the age bracket, or do we perhaps, would that muddy the waters? Do we need to start, maybe thinking about a secondary scheme that isn't, sort of the same as apprenticeship, so that people can concentrate? Is there a worry that we dilute it too much if we expand the age range?
Well, I think part of the problem is, and here the political class has perhaps done a bit of a disservice, because the way we've tried to sell apprenticeships to the public as a good thing is a way of getting young people off the streets. And actually, that's not what apprenticeships are about. It's essentially about, more mature people who have jobs and who are advancing their skills within that. I mean, the vast majority of apprentices are adults. They're not youngsters kicking their heels. And the most serious problem you have is getting an entry route into apprenticeship. And we did develop a scheme for working on that. But I think that is an area where there's quite a big gap in the system. It's getting the kids who probably can't get their C's at GCSEs, and we want them, by the time they're 19, 20, 21, actually on a proper apprenticeship course. And the mechanism for getting to A to B is actually very difficult.
Well, the government did, I think a couple of years ago, there was a scheme trying to encourage returner mothers as well, wasn't there? And bringing them back into the digital workplace. Okay, so now we are into this section. But what are you doing over there? Oh, we've got a second mic giver.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm Nick Natuk. I'm from Arch Apprentices. We're a specialist provider of IT and digital apprenticeships. I've had lots of conversations with employers over the last few months, and in particular large employers seem to be focused on developing their existing workforce via apprenticeships. And it links to what Vince said there. In view of that, do we think there's a real risk that the levy and the extra funding that's been provided is going to focus more on the workforce that's already there, rather than bringing in fresh young talent into the workplace?
Anthony, what do you think?
I think there is certainly a risk of that. There are 22,000 levy payers. They're going to be contributing about 3 billion into the levy pot, which leaves about 1.3 million other employers that are not engaged with the reforms directly, because they're not levy payers. And I think there is a real risk that too much focus goes on those 22,000. And in particular, I think there's 400 employers in the UK economy that will contribute half of the total levy amount. And so much focus is going on those employers. I think there is a real risk that everybody else, and particularly small businesses, are kind of left out in the cold, and that we don't get that contribution that small businesses make to the development of apprentices.
Mike, what would you like to see for your members as perhaps a safety net to this happening?
I think first and foremost we need clarity around what is actually going to be available to them. We need to make it simple and easy to understand. We do need larger employers who value their supply chains in being able to support them in helping them with apprenticeships. And that is a win-win situation, but we have to get it right. And we have one opportunity now. If we fail on this, we will lose it for a long time to come.
No,
I suppose just secondary to that, though, what large or small employers, I guess part of it is what can we do to get more young talent? What can we do, large or small employers? How can we encourage them to bring in more talent rather than just develop perhaps who they've got already in the business?
I think a levy can be a blunt instrument if you're not careful, because if you look at small businesses, they train when they need to. And I've had questions coming through to our members saying, do you train this person every week or every month? Well, actually, small businesses don't do it that way at all. They train when they need it, if they're in a particular trade sector, when they have a new machine, they need to upskill their people, and it may just be 1 or it could be 10. And I think we just need to be making people aware of what it is on the need, and that's the need of the business, as well as recognising there is a very clear need to be empowering our young people to understand what is out there, what the opportunities are, and as I said a moment ago, that is going to take time, but it's for everybody's benefit, because there are so many small businesses in the supply chain for large businesses. If they don't get that continuity of skills coming through, and we see it at the moment within the construction sector and in the engineering sector, there are thousands of skills going to need to be replaced within the next decade. If we can't get that right, and we're not going to have the external workforce coming in that we have had, then we've got a real problem. And at the heart of everything that's going on at the moment is education, skills and training, and all businesses at some point must be training their workforce for their future, otherwise they won't have a future.
If you could pass the microphone back to... You know, it's weird, isn't it? Because we've had conflicting stories now from the audience. You know, you've got people saying we can't get the candidates through the door, and then, so presumably one of the best ways to make sure that people take on new candidates is to make sure that they get them through the door. Yes, sir.
Is this on?
No, yes, it is now.
Okay. Hi, Paul Smith. I'm the Senior Sales Manager at Mega Nexus, proudly based in the London Borough of Camden. Speaking as someone who's heading up a national project with approved premises for the education, reskilling and rehabilitation of young offenders and reintegrating them back into society and community. Obviously, I'm very passionate about the rehabilitation and education of young offenders. I would like to invite the panel, what more can industry and government do collectively to ensure that the resources that the apprenticeship levy will free up are directly targeted at those most vulnerable and socially excluded in society, and enable the levy to help get a lot of young, vulnerable ex-offenders back into employment and effectively into law-abiding, tax-paying members of society again?
That's a great question, and this comes to our issues around diversity and inclusion, right, Mike? I mean, what is being done to reach out to these kinds of demographics?
Having used ex-offenders in my own business, if you can only recognise that very often they are people who are looking just for that simple opportunity to make a new start in life, they can prove to be a most loyal and invaluable makeup of your existing workforce. But it's not just ex-offenders, it's ex-military, it's disabled people, it's a whole diverse range that actually we need to be helping small businesses who can offer much more if we can only use them or utilise them to enable that to happen. But also it's surprising, when I talk to large businesses, they in the past have always been quite reticent about going down that route, and I think as a society we need to recognise the ability, as you may have seen in my blog in the Telegraph not so long ago, recognise the opportunities that are there to utilise people for what they can deliver, not for what they did in the past.
Okay, I saw 3 more hands up here, and then do we have any on the far left wing? No, so we're going to do these 3 hands here, and then we're going to scoot back over to you guys on that far side.
Yes, hello. My name is Richard Allberg. I'm a director of an apprenticeship provider called Corndale, but I'm also chairman of an FE college, and in my spare time, CEO of a technology business. So I wear with several hats. I have the challenge of recruiting developers, and I'm embarrassed to say I offshore because I can't get enough in the UK. And my observation is we're at risk of failing one of our own tests. You spoke about numeracy and the lack of it. Well, the levy is going to raise the best part of $3 billion, given the preponderance of apprenticeship provisions at level 1, level 2 and level 3, funded mainly at the 3,000 to 4,000 level. That's the best part of 1 million apprentices per year. Our problem's not lack of funding. There's ample funding for the big firms and for the small firms. Our challenge is lack of take-up by employers and lack of knowledge of the opportunities for training available, not just for young people, which is great, but also for vocational training to bridge the productivity gap that we have in this country, whether young or old. And finally, when we talk about IT, my observation is there are many employment areas where you need all sorts of prior skills. Actually, to be a software developer, you just need to be clever. if you're clever, you can learn pretty quickly how to code. So I'm not fussed so much about the challenges of schools, learning. It's a problem, of course, for society. I'm just challenged by the fact we have a relatively small number of clever people who seem to recognise this is a career worth aspiring to, for which is ample funding for training.
So we got a leaky, our pipe is leaky at one end and blocked at the other, right? Paula, what can we do to, do you know any good plumbers?
Yes, indeed, but that isn't the only apprenticeship that one could take these days. I guess it all depends on, the definition of clever. There are a variety of ways to be clever. And I think that the biggest thing that we can all do and that we should be doing is actually around collaborating. And that is whether we collaborate with our training providers, whether we can collaborate and help small businesses. I mean, certainly I've always made the offer to small businesses in and around Cambridge that if you have apprentices that are learning the skill of your business in whatever clever way that may be, and their training provider is helping them to achieve certain standards, and the area that possibly the training providers are not always best placed to support the apprentice is in the soft skills and the employability skills, that's an area that we have put together our own ILM endorsed programme, the Aviva Springboard, and I, in my local area, would offer employers the opportunity to send their clever people to come learn some employability skills, because what's going to happen is pretty much in the future everything that can be done by a computer will be done by a computer, and so the only thing we have is our uniqueness and our own unique selling point around our soft skills, employability skills, and that's the bit that we can all help develop young people, regardless of how clever they are about their software development.
Yes, the nerd rapture is rapidly approaching. 2040, Ray Kurzweil said, there would be single computers with as much intelligence as the entirety of mankind put together, or as much brain processing power anyway. Right, gentlemen there, then we're going to you, and then we're going over there.
My name's Edward, I work for the Civil Service. So if I'm creating a new apprenticeship, could I ask the experience on the stage who have run apprenticeships, should I create one that's broad, an IT apprenticeship, and somebody who joins it could do many different things and work out what they enjoy the most, and then maybe they choose to be a business analyst like the earlier apprentice? Or should I create one that's quite specific? This will make you a software engineer at the end, and that's all you can do. Where do you think the best value is to be gained?
It's a good question. I mean, John, because there is, if you give the too wide a goal to shoot for, then you're going to end up with way too many people with a really scattered impression. Well, what would be your advice, leaning towards the more directed end goal, or a wider goal that allows people to perhaps see where they fit within the industry through that process?
Well, I think the first thing, they have to have a job role, and whatever that job role should dictate that learning that they're doing. You can't just take an apprentice on that hasn't got a proper job. So are they going to be a data analyst? Are they going to be a network engineer? Are they going to be a software developer? Now, through that process, I'll come back to the part I talked about earlier about empowerment of the employer. If that apprenticeship that you've put them on is wrong, or you realise their job role is wrong and they should diversify into software developer from network engineer, you can stop that program and move them on to another one. There are generic ones in the IT sector that will allow you to do networking, cloud, bit of development as an infrastructure technician. But if they haven't got a job role that they can demonstrate those outcomes and those skills, they cannot pass that apprenticeship. So if there isn't something that meets a generic need, that's where you again as employers can come together and say, this doesn't meet our need in the civil service, the NHS, whoever. Is there a standard we need to get together to create that is fit for purpose? But you cannot put someone on a standard if they are not employed in a proper job. So that should dictate what they go on.
Anthony?
I think the specialist route is actually the right choice. I appreciate John's diplomatic answer, but I think specialism is really important because actually that's where an organisation can get maximum value from the skills that you're developing. It's where the person that's learning those skills can get maximum value because that specialism gives them that set of skills that is valued by others. But I also think that our sector is changing so quickly that you are going into a job and you are learning about a specialism now that may disappear in 3, 5, 10 years' time because of new technologies that are available. I think that our sector just needs to be continuously learning specialist skills. And I think actually putting apprentices on those specialist pathways is very, very important to set the pace for their career in the future.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're going to take one more question from this section of the audience. That gentleman there, otherwise there's going to be a riot over there if I don't get to him. We're almost at the end of our time. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Jason Grant. I'm the CEO of UX Coach, and we're on a mission to coach 1 billion people design thinking. And one of the remarks that Cable made was that in Germany, engineers in factories get taught design, because design is about how things work, and it's about innovation, products, making people work together, collaboration, systems thinking, all these beautiful things which have enabled in the past Great Britain to become the nation where industrial revolution happened. Whereas today we're talking about paperwork, admin, leaky pipes, blockages, etc. Right? So design thinking is what enables people to really think outside the box and become innovators, etc. So can we make sort of a pact here together tonight to start bringing design thinking back into Britain as the core driver towards, we've helped companies grow by tenfold through distributing design thinking in their ranks, right? That should be the core apprenticeships, because 90% of our jobs today will be automated by IT, and design thinking is the only thing that we as humans have that isn't, automatable. So can somebody please comment on this?
I mean, he's agreeing with you, Vince, basically that design thinking is important. Do you think we are on a road towards, incorporating that into our mindset particularly regards technology? And this comes back to what we were saying earlier about, in some ways, technology needs a rebranding. IT careers need a rebranding. It's not just engineers and software coders and boring people sitting behind computers. There are some very vibrant and very soft-skilled digital skills required.
Well, my simple answer is that, as with so many other things, Britain is world-beating at the top level in terms of design. And if you go to the Royal College of Design near Albert Hall, it is an amazing place. I mean, this is where Hockney the artist and Dyson the inventor came from, and they mix creative arts with engineering skills and produce amazing products. And the most interesting industrial visit I had in my 5 years was going to the Jaguar Land Rover Design Centre. And they bring together engineers, conventional engineers, with artists. And it's the fusion of the two that produces brilliant work. We do that at the top level, but lower down, it doesn't happen. Lower down, we put people into mechanical slots. And that's the contrast I was making with the way the Germans are developing their apprenticeship scheme. And I think, I'm not in the apprentice training business, but I think we do need to think about how we get more imagination into course content.
Right, we've got time for maybe 2 questions. We're running really late. I think I promised that section of the audience that we'd come to them. There's going to be a riot if we don't. So, yes, if you just give the microphone to you. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Chris Eyre. I run a digital and technology business based in the north. I'd like to understand about supply chain in apprenticeships. I think a long time ago I heard that employers are going to be able to delegate their levy down their supply chain. I would find that really useful in the B2B space. I provide shared services in digital and technology, but I'm finding increasingly people are creating apprentices where they're not giving people career progression because they've got to spend the money and they can't delegate it to me. So whatever happened to supply chain delegation? Is it there somewhere in the paperwork? I don't know.
John, what do you think? I mean, this kind of comes back to what Anthony was saying earlier as well, doesn't it?
So it's always been the case that they were launching the levy and that the supply chain would come in by 2018. So the current situation, and there are some SFA people in the room, but I had a conversation with them last week, is that by the end of this first year of the levy, there will be a pot of where employers have that 10% that they haven't spent that they can then allocate out of that end of this year in 2018. So it is still there. It is still the case that those large employers that can't spend their money, and you might want to move up the road to BAE systems, they won't spend all this, is to work with the larger employers who can then put that money back into their choice of who they work with on the supply chain, but it is 10% and it is 2018. The exact date, I can't tell you.
And one last question. Bear in mind that you're the only thing standing between the audience and some canapes, so keep it brief.
Hi, my name's Tony. I work for iTech Learning Technologies, which is a provider in Essex. And we are just chomping at the bit about the endpoint assessment. So you knew it was going to come up. I mean, is there going to be... I mean, we talked a lot about quality of the provider and the training, but if there's no information being given to us, it's quite difficult to then prepare for that's going to be coming, you know, after April, in May. So you're not actually giving the providers long enough to actually prepare for this. Is there going to be samples released? You know, what is, you know, we just need some clarity on the endpoint assessment.
Yeah, and one of the comments we had actually from one of the audience questions I didn't read out from 3AAA too was, you know, about what about, I know it was a point that you made, Vince, what about people who aren't actually, you know, aren't good at passing tests, and is that, you know, what anybody want to tackle that question? Do we know when there's going to be more information? Do we know what the rules are going to be?
Well, I had some information through yesterday from my provider about the endpoint assessment, and the BCS are indeed the awarding body. And you're right, a lot of people have been chomping at the bit, and certainly the apprentices have been chomping at the bit and concerning themselves about it. But yesterday I had some very good information from the assessor directly to the apprentices and copied into myself and the mentors, explaining a lot more about that endpoint assessment. So there's certainly some information that is now available.
You need to speak to your provider, maybe.
They are a
provider.
provider.
Oh, right, okay, right, sorry. Apologies. Right, so the rule hasn't been set yet, yeah.
So currently in the digital space, there are 2 endpoint assessment organisations. BCS are one of those organisations. And at the moment, there are some endpoint assessments available on the early standards that have been released, and the rest are being worked on that come in line with those standards being ready for registration, along with the knowledge modules as the journey goes along. So we have got a development phase to roll those out. I'm happy to have that conversation with you, quite happy, but it's done standard by standard as they're released, so they're not done in bulk because each one has to be individualised.
Well, time has absolutely flown by. It is 9 o'clock, which means there are drinks and canapes waiting for you just through that door. You know what? It's been really interesting tonight. I think it's a good range of comments, a good range of concerns still to be met. We've got some brilliant experts out there if you're looking for opportunities in your own business or to learn more about the opportunities, perhaps for young people that you know who may benefit from an apprenticeship scheme. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us. Remember the hashtag BCS Apprenticeships is still going. I would like you one more time to put your hands together and a huge round of applause for my brilliant panel, to Vince Cable, Mike Cherry, John Pritchard, Anthony Impey, Paula Parker, and Sap from earlier on. Enjoy the networking. I'll have a chat with you out there, and thank you very much for joining us.